It's always important to be able to have a conversation with somebody who can uh, attribute to our knowledge of history. It's also important to be able to have a discussion with somebody who grew up in our hometown. Oftentimes you have people who come into town and they do a good job with on jobs, etc. But when you got somebody who is here from where the rubber meets the road, then it creates the kind of situation where you can get good information, particularly if, in fact, this individual is not only involved in the community, but this individual is also a relative or somebody who really kind of put Macon on the map. We talking about Mr. Tutti Frutti himself, Little Richard. And we're going to have a discussion about Little Richard and his growing up and what he's contributed to the community and how he has not received all of the recognition, though he's beginning to, that
Sure.
he
Yes,
should
sir.
have received. And so we have with us today Mr. Stanley Stewart, who's a cousin of Little Richard, but who also is a homeboy, he's a local guy, grew up in our community. So we just want to start off, Stanley, by just giving us a talk about yourself a little bit, man. Talk
Well,
about you growing up and you being from Macon and things you remember about
Mr.
being from Macon. Take it away.
Well, Mr. Havisham, it's a pleasure to be with you and with Call to Action. Everything you do and your family has done in the community for years is, I take my hat off to it. Of course, I was raised here in Macon, Georgia. I wasn't born here. I was born in Washington, D.C., but I came here when I was 9 months old. My parents moved back down here, and so Macon is all that I know. And Macon is home, and it's just such a beautiful place to have been raised in and to have grown up in, and to when you look around and see people like yourself you've known for years, it just makes it more special, and so I couldn't imagine living anywhere else but Macon, Georgia.
Okay, so where'd you grow up in Macon?
Grew up in East Macon, grew up out in Sherland Drive, Belvedere Manor, off of Sherland Drive, out near Bowden Golf Course. There too, that was a beautiful community to grow up in. Grew up at a time where when you walked out your house and left your house, you saw Black business owners, Black teachers and lawyers and doctors. And it just was a special place and a special community to grow up in. And it aided in my development as a young man. When you go out into the world and you saw different things and people would tell you certain things were transpiring in the world, I didn't see that in my community. I really didn't see it. And so I used to tell my mom all the time, thank goodness that we moved back here to Macon, Georgia. My family now, the Miles family had been in Macon for years. My aunt Mosetta Miles was the first Black supervisor of social workers at DFACS. She
Wow.
graduated Spelman in 1929. And so she built the family house out there in Belvedere Manor. And so to grow up and hearing her stories, and my great grandfather on my mom's side was President Johnson C. Smith up in Charlotte, the
Wow.
Presbyterian school up there. Yes, sir. So he was there from 1907 to 1947. So having all that history in your background, you just really realize that you care a lot about your community and you care a lot about people. And it kind of brings me into where I am now. I really, I look around Macon, and I'm so thankful to be here in Macon, of course. But at the same time, there are a lot of things that we have to kind of solve and make sure that we deal with.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So what school you went to? Talk a little bit about your schooling.
No, went to Northeast. Went to Northeast High School, then went on to Morehouse College. As a matter of fact, this is a full circle moment because my senior year of high school, you contacted me to be on Leroy Thomas's show, which was Ebony Speaks. And so I was on there it was 1988 going into 1989. My senior year was 1989. And of course, Mr. Thomas was talking about where we're going off to school. And that evening, I think it wasn't Senator Brown at the time. I think it was the Board of Education member Brown, Robert Brown, of course.
Yeah.
And also Mr. Minister Jeffrey Lawrence, I think, was on there with me also. So you think about that, that's been almost 35 years ago.
Right.
So that's the beautiful thing about Macon, Georgia, that you can have these relationships for all these years. And I enjoyed my time, at Northeast, went on to Morehouse, as I mentioned. And during that time, my great aunt had a stroke. And so most of my college years were spent going back and forth between Macon and Atlanta, helping my mom out with Mount Mosetta. So I didn't really get caught up in a lot of the college life that people always talk about, because it's always been to me, it's been about helping family.
Right.
And so, I helped my great aunt during that time. And then in recent years, my mother suffered a stroke in 2010. I was working for the Board of Education at the time, and also Stewart Advertising, my company. And when mom had that stroke, I left my position with the Board of Education, ran my company full time, and took care of my mom up until the time she passed in 2 years ago. June the 9th, 2021 was the time that my mom passed. So my life has always been taking care of family, and doing the things that you were raised to do. And I promised my mother up until the time she passed that what she instilled in me, I want to make sure that I put out there in the world. The traits that she put in me about caring and treating people the way you want to be treated, and making sure, too much is given, much is required, which is Luke 12:48. You want to make sure that you do that to the rest of the world. And that's what drives me every day I wake up.
Well, that's outstanding, and I'm sure she will be proud that it's been reflected in your actions and interactions. So, talk a little bit about your community involvement and the things that have been important to you, and how you have delved into different elements of the community in an effort to assist the community, and even political aspirations.
Yes, sir. I really, I don't like politics, but I like being a public servant. So going forward, there's some things I definitely want to, delve more into. I don't know what that is right now. I can answer that question. To be honest with you, I just have to do a little more praying about it and thinking about it, and wherever it leads me, it'll lead me in that direction. But at the same time, I always try to stay active, in the things that I do, whether it be vice president of Belvedere Manor Weaver Heights Neighborhood Association, whether it be involved with the sheriff's department, whether it be involved, whatever it is that you're doing. I try to make sure that I'm accessible to people, because that shows that you really, and it's a sincere accessibility, if you will. So I always try to stay active in the community and make them build.
That's outstanding. Okay, now I understand that there's a bloodline between you and Little Richard.
Yeah, Richard. Richard's on my father's side of the family, on my father's side, but on his mom's side. So I'm not related to the Pennemans. I'm related to the Stewarts. Little Richard's mother was a Stewart. So yeah, Little Richard was always. I knew Richard as an older man, of course. I don't, all the, the height of his fame, so to speak, was before my time. I was born in 1971. So, what happened in the 50s and 60s was a little before my time. But it was just such a great thing to have. There again, it talks about the family connection. Richard Penniman being on my dad's side, Richard Scott, who used to manage the New Kids on the Block, and Mark Wahlberg, and worked for Motown and managed Diana Ross, was my mom's cousin, Dick Scott. So Dick Scott and Richard Penniman, Little Richard, knew each other from the days of Ballard Hudson. So Macon has all that history, and to have that in the family was just something that really, it gave you a sense of, if they could do it at the time, if Little Richard did what he did at the time that he came out of Macon, Georgia, was around the early 50s, there's no excuse for me or anybody else not being able to meet my goals of today. And that's one of the great things when we came up with, conceptualized the idea for the Little Richard House, which I hope everybody has a chance to go by and see it, and go in it and be a part of it, because it's an interactive type of place. But he always talked about the Pleasant Hill community. And so it's there for, not just for the resource center, but it's also there as a place where young people can go in today and see what Richard did, coming from where he came from at a time when, the racial climate was terrible here in not just Macon, but in the United States of America, and definitely in the American South. So what he did, and we talked about this, at the premiere of the movie the other night, which I really appreciate you and Ms. Havisham being a part of. Richard's overall presence broke down the walls of segregation, when you think about it, because it's the first time that you had interracial audiences really sitting together watching a performance. So, his life really mattered. And, what he did coming from Pleasant Hill, Georgia, I mentioned the fact that a little boy dreamed, a little boy believed in himself. And so those attributes can still be done today. The American dream still lives. It's just on us, those of us who are older, to make sure the younger generation knows And we are somehow a bridge between the older generation and the younger generation, making sure that they realize that.
Yeah, and that's very, very important. So how did the idea, congratulations on the Little Richard house. I think it's proper and befitting that he is memorialized in our community.
Yes,
And
sir.
I join you in encouraging individuals to go and visit the house and
Yes,
learn
sir.
more about, what needs to be done in that respect. So how was the movie conceptualized? What was kind of like the beginning of say, hey, there really needs to be some kind of, and let me mention this while I'm thinking about it. Man, Newt Collier is so proud of that.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know the
Yeah.
role he played.
Oh no,
I mean, I just want to take my hat off to Newt.
yes.
He does a lot of good things. He's a
Yes, sir.
walking history book.
He
He's a
is.
good musician. How was that the idea of a movie conceptualized?
Well, actually, a lady by the name of Lisa Cortez, who's out of New York. She's a famed director and a famed producer, got in contact with me, and she worked in conjunction with Rolling Stone magazine, the big entertainment magazine. And so she really is the one we really had to take our hat off to make sure that she got the ball rolling in that regard. And once she came locally, of course, I helped her put things together here in Macon. And she had a chance to interview myself and Newton Collier and Mr. Harper and a few other people. And of course, they rode through Pleasant Hill and, took some outside shots and some B-roll, if you will, and put it all together with Mick Jagger and Paul McCartney and just all the people that Richard has influenced in his life, because he had a huge influence. I mean, rock and roll, the genre of rock and roll started right here in Macon, Georgia, right down on what is now MLK, but at the time Broadway. And so it has kept people, young and vibrant all these years. The Rolling Stones are still going at 80. So, that is really a direct correlation to what Little Richard did and what he conceptualized in his time. And as far as I'll
Yes,
add this, Mr. Havisham, if it's okay. As far as the Little Richard house is concerned, we have to give thanks to Representative James Beverly. He was the one that really thought about moving that house from the original location on 4th Avenue, I believe it was, up into Craft Street, where it is now. It was a very lofty project. It took some time to get that done, and then we went through the process of making sure we had the backing of the city. There was a time, you can look it up online, where the city was thinking about maybe backing out of some things, and I called Richard that morning personally myself and told him to say, well, Cousin Richard, I want to call you tonight in front of City Hall, in front of the commission meeting, and I want to put you on speakerphone. I want you to tell, not in a braggadocious manner, but just in a positive manner, what you have done for the city of Macon. Because Richard, everywhere he went, he was the brand ambassador for Macon, Georgia. And so he did that. You can look it up on WMAZ and see where he called in that night. And it was just a great conversation that he had with the people of Macon. And at the end of that conversation, we received funding for that part of the Little Richard house. So, but James Beverly is the one I thank for that.
Yeah, that's very, very outstanding. Okay, well, the movie premiered not by a couple of weeks ago, and a great movie.
Yes, sir.
So, where does it go from here? I mean, what's happening with the movie now?
The movie is doing well. It actually premiered about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, at Sundance, the Sundance Film Festival, which was Robert Redford's, of course, film festival, and won all kinds of awards. And it's been at the Newport Film Festival, and so it is open worldwide now. When we opened here in Macon about a week or two back, it was opening worldwide that particular time. So it can be seen. It's going to be on HBO Max. And you have to, as people say all the time, check your local listings to find out exactly where it is, because I don't know exactly where it's being shown, but it has opened worldwide. We had a journalist here from London who came about, and he said on the 28th of this month is opening in London. And so I'll be in Paris and London in about a month or so. And so while I'm over there, I'm actually on vacation, but while I'm over there, I'll also have a chance to meet with some people who are talking about doing some other things as far as the BBC is concerned. Also meet with Jordan, who was a journalist here in Macon. So Richard's legacy is going to continue to live, and we just want to make sure that we are fueling that legacy with the film and fueling that legacy with projects that we bring about here in Macon and bring people to Macon. Because one of the things I talked about with Richard right before he passed, And Richard always said this. In Richard's way of talking, he would say, well, baby, we're the past. He was talking about himself and Otis and James and the Allman Brothers. And I was telling him to say, yes, but we still can build on that past. But at the same time, we want to create legacies going forward. So we take our hat off to people like Jason Aldean, who's from Macon now, the country singer. Jasmine Habisham, who's an opera singer. Bob Lennon, who's doing great things in hip hop. So that's the future of making music. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's very outstanding. So talk a little bit, if you would. And I think it was very, very appropriate. And that's why everybody needs to see the movie. And it may serve as a motivation to young people to take care of business, and learn about what you're doing,
Yes, sir.
and do references and analyze who you're working with.
Yes,
And
sir.
just talk a little bit of how, because I mean, people don't think about it enough. And I didn't think about it enough to just think about the impact. I mean, he a lot of people, and then I forgot that Pat Boone did Tutti Frutti.
yeah, that's a big, that's a big thing.
And the reason it's important is that we need to have our ducks in a row with all the talent and the inventions,
Right.
the things that we create. We need
Yes.
to have our ducks in a row so we can receive the benefits of
Yes.
what we do. Because Richard should have died a billionaire.
Yeah.
He really should have died a billionaire.
Yeah.
Based on the contributions that he made to the music, the changes that he made. So just talk a little bit about that, and hopefully, even if it's just from a historical perspective, I hope it's more. I don't know about the particular workings of it, but he at least can begin, although it's posthumously, can begin to get his due.
Yeah, and that's the thing we're working on. I was always taught if you take care of business, business will take care of you. And so, unfortunately, the era that Richard grew up in, and not just Richard, a lot of entertainers, especially Black entertainers, mainly Black entertainers, I should say, were taken advantage of during that period of time. They of course were producing the music and putting the music out there, but at the same time, they weren't recouping the royalties as they should on the back end of that. So it wasn't until recent times, as a story about Michael Jackson, when Michael bought the Beatles catalog, that Michael gave a portion or maybe all of Richard's catalog back to him. So if that is indeed the case, you have to do your homework to find out if it is or not. But it may just be a story that's being told. But if that is indeed the case, and you take your hats off to Michael Jackson for doing that. But people grew up at a time when all that was just, it was just a bad time for entertainers to have their work taken from them, to be honest with you. And Richard suffered from that. In the movie, they talk about how he went down and he even picketed and protested, wanted to try to get more of his royalties back. That's part of the movie. That's really a definite part of it. So, show business is just that. That's a show aspect, and that's a business aspect. And so when you get into that business, you need to make sure that you're taking care of the business part of it. And if you're a person who likes to be creative, then you need to surround yourself with a team of people who are going to be there for you and that you can really trust to do the proper things for your business part of it.
Now, what about I would talk to you about it later, but I would really like to be able to show some clips, maybe as a part of this conversation, of the movies. But we can kind of cross that bridge, after the conversation is over. Now, so what are you working on now? Are there things that you're doing as it relates to Richard, or some of your other activities, that you would like to familiarize the community with? And are there things that you would need any assistance from the community on?
Well, we appreciate that. As far as Richard is concerned, just want to make sure that people, continue his legacy, whether it be through the Little Richard House. There's some things that we're talking about doing a Little Richard Festival. I mentioned this to him also right before he passed. Richard Rocks is a music festival idea that I conceptualized for my own company, which I would love to kind of get off the ground and bring people here to Macon. That's probably about a year or two down the line, though. But the main thing in the interim is to make sure that Richard's legacy stays vibrant and front and center in the Central Georgia community. And one of the things we touched on just now, Mr. Havisham, is the fact that, it's good for tourism. It's good for Macon, Georgia. I mean, what other city can talk about the fact that you got Little Richard on one corner, you've got Otis Redding on another, you got the Allman Brothers on another. Those are tourist dollars that were just longing to come to Macon, Georgia. So that's
and as quiet as it's kept, I don't know whether he's on the corner, but you got James Brown too.
James Brown, that's right. Yeah,
you know what I'm saying. A lot of people, a lot of people don't acknowledge that, but James Brown got his start in Macon, Georgia.
Right here on Mulberry Street. My neighbor, was Hamp Swain.
Yeah.
And Mr. Swain used to always tell me, he said, James recorded Please, Please, Please right there on Mulberry Street. Yeah. And so that, that is definitely, Augusta always talks about James because that's, of course, where he, I guess, was born in that area and spent most of his time. But, he got his start right here in Macon, Georgia. So we can't discount that at all, and so he's part of the lore and legacy of Macon, Georgia. Yeah, yeah.
So we were going to discuss, things in which you are involved now, and maybe are there things that that the community can assist you with?
Well, I appreciate that. No, my company, Stewart Advertising, has clients here in the area. We've done a lot of work for former NBA players like Mike Glenn and Tree Rollins. We just recently brought the Mike Glenn collection to the Tubman Museum, which was a huge success. We had people pack the bottom level and the top level of the museum. So Mike is a dear friend of mine. So Stewart Advertising, Stewart Management is doing well. I really appreciate you touting that, but it's not about me today. I just want to make sure that we, keep things going forward in Rich's legacy. And personally, if I can do anything, anytime to help anybody out here in the city of Macon, I'm always accessible for that.
Well, that's outstanding. I think we need to give a shout out to Dr. Ellis, Chris.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I mentioned that.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Dr. Ellis, he and his wife both, I mentioned that the night of the premiere, the fact that this is a multi-million-dollar building built right there in Pleasant Hill, and they chose to name it. We had a press conference and everything about, named it after Little Richard, after the Richard Wayne Penniman building. So yeah, we have to thank him to the hilt for doing that, he and his family. And he mentioned that day what Richard really meant to him. And it was just, it was moving to hear some of the things that he talked about at that press conference. And then Brad Evans over to the Society Gardens, the first person to put the mural up by a world-renowned artist named Jinx. I think it's Jinx. It's a person who painted that. And so he did a great job. So anytime you're riding down Ingleside, just make sure you take a look over there at Society Garden, or go to the Society Garden and support them, of course, and see that mural of Richard.
Okay, well, so I think it's important that people who have not seen the movie, I'm glad that it's going to be on HBO Max.
HBO Max.
It's not on YouTube yet. I mean, I'm sure they're not showing it on YouTube.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's there because it's in the theaters more so than anywhere else. But I Am Everything is the name of the movie.
I Am Everything is the name of the movie, and it was such a phenomenal movie. And then the good thing about it, I think you need to talk about it, because although you mentioned it briefly, I think it's good for bringing the community together.
Yes.
It's expressed in the movie how, you had white kids and black kids. They all, although the neighborhood tried to keep them separate,
right,
because of Little Richard's music and the impact that he had on these young people, they said, "No, we're gonna see this thing together." So, talk a little bit about his role in integrating the community back during the time when segregation was staunch.
Yeah, and as I say, that was before my time. But I always listen to the older people in the family talk about that period in history, and even today there are divisions that we still need to bridge the gaps among. And I think we can learn from that. We can learn from Richard's existence based on what he did, and by bringing people together, that we, even to this very day, need to do a better job of bringing people together across all the divides that may seem to be, I call them phony barriers, because when you think about it, in the final analysis, we're in this ship together. We're sailing in the same direction. And as a nation, we've got to make sure that we are really cognizant of the fact that, yeah, you're going to have differences of opinions, But at the same time, we want to make sure that we move our nation, our state, and our city in a positive direction. The only way to do that is by working together. And whether you learn it from Little Richard or you learn it from your everyday life, is something that really needs to be a part of our American dialect, if you will, nowadays.
Well, that's very, very important. Hey, man, I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abersham.
I appreciate. I appreciate what you've done for the community. I appreciate you working hard on the legacy of Little Richard. I appreciate the Little Richard House.
Yes,
I
sir.
appreciate your role in naming Dr. Ellis's building, the Richard W. Penniman building, because the way it sits, you know, you go down Georgia Avenue or whichever Hardeman and you see Richard W. Penniman on the building. So that helps solidify
It does.
legacy in our community. I appreciate your help with the movie. I Am Everything.
Yes, sir.
And, because, you know, it was not just the music, it was the transgression and the introduction of rock and roll. It was the introduction of scenarios where people could come together and, you know, on a common cause and get along. And it should still continue today. So I appreciate what you've done at the Tupman Museum and bringing that exhibit here. So, you know, let's just continue to move forward.
I appreciate it, Mr. Abersham.
You know, just continue to work hard and do what you're doing. I encourage everybody to go and visit the Little Richard House, and whenever it's available, go see the movie because it was very, very educational, historical, and inspirational. So thank you for all you do, Mr. Stanley Stewart. This is a call to action. I'm your host, Alex Habersham, having interviewed Mr. Stanley Stewart, the owner, Chief Executive Officer
Yes,
of
sir.
Stewart Advertising and Promotion.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, man, for all you do.
Thank you,
And-
Mr. Abersham.
And we wanna, and you know, I know Richard is listening to us.
Yes, sir.
I just want to acknowledge him and
Yes,
everything that he's done for his community and what it has meant for Macon, Georgia, as it relates to his branding
yes.
of our hometown. Because I've seen interviews. I'm from Macon, Georgia.
Macon, Georgia. All around the world.
So from Macon, Georgia, this is a call to action. Have a great day.
www.maconblackpages.com.
Get ready, Central Georgia.
The 2023-2024 edition
The Macon Middle Georgia Black Pages.
is coming soon. Check your listing. Visit
MaconBlackPages.com.
to check the status of your listing. If it needs to be updated or removed, please contact us. List your business.
We give all African American businesses a free listing.
Visit our website to submit your free business listing so that it will be listed in the directory
For the new
2023-2024 edition. Advertise your business in the Black Pages.
You cannot afford not to advertise.
So check your listing, list your business, and advertise with us.
Give us a call at 478-464-0074.
Stop by 590 DT Walton Senior Way in Macon.
or you can go to our website, MaconBlackPages.com.
The 2023-2024 edition is coming soon.